Now, to talk about Nelson Mandela's legacy, we're now joined from our Durban studios by political analyst Xolani Dube. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. And yes, whenever we have events such as this, we have an opportunity to remember this iconic figure. And the issue and the word and the idea of his legacy keeps coming up. And as the years go by, I'm starting to see a lot of people revisiting it, reversioning it. And I just wonder, 30 years on, what are we seeing in terms of Mandela's legacy?
Mandela, we have to accept that is a motive myth that was imposed to the South Africans, and is an immaculate motive myth. And when we try to perforate this motive myth, they view those who are perforating this motive myth as if they are not doing that in accordance to what Mandela was promoting in our country, of which is social cohesion and all this kind of romantic or utopian society that each and every human being would like to be existing. But the fact of the matter is, in whatever Mandela said, there is not a person to a certain extent that really dealt with the issues that affect the South Africans, and is the right time now to revisit and to judge this immaculative motive myth that was imposed to the South Africans. And it is not a coincidence that our country, as we speak, is on its knees and they are invoking him. So as well as in 1990s, when the minerals energy complex or the ruling class were in a corner and they released Mandela, or they unleashed Mandelasm to us. And now when Cyril Ramaphosa also, or the ANC, the governing party, is in a corner in terms of failing in its social delivery, and now they are unleashing this motive myth to say, look guys, what is paramount to this country is social cohesion, is peace, and so forth. But they are forgetting that they can't be, we are not going to have peace, we are not going to have social cohesion if we have not addressed the issues that are at the heart of the South African, of which is the issue of land expropriation without compensation, and is the issue of economic redress and so forth. And so I think we can only judge Mandela by juxtaposing the material social conditions of the people who liberated him from the prison, as if those people who liberated Mandela from prison are really, in terms of material condition, are free, or if they are still experiencing the colonialism and apartheid inhumane.
All right. So is it that what then starts to happen is that people conflate the man, the individual, with the organization that he belonged to? Because a lot of the issues that you were talking about are the legacies of the organization and its various leaders and incarnations over time. Whereas he was a man at a specific moment in time that did certain things, led certain things, and helped, I suppose, get South Africa over the line. Is there a way to separate the two?
Look, we have to understand that Mandela as a motive myth is a contested one, you know. And as I've said, that he was crafted by a particular section of our society, the ruling elite. And if you are aware, and then they imposed him to us. And then when he was with us, he had a particular role to play. And we associated ourselves with him because we only remembered Mandela before he went to prison. And then we're still expecting that Mandela who was in prison, in Pietermaritzburg, that he will have that Mandela. But after 27 years, and it was a totally different Mandela with a totally different message. And now that's where a number of scholars, a number of people are asking themselves, is the Mandela that went into prison and the Mandela post-prison are the same Mandela? Are they aspiring the same kind of mission, where the mission of liberating the so-called the historically dispossessed? But when you really looked the post-prison Mandela, you could see that, you know, the Mandela was, to a certain extent, has been worn by a particular class in our country, because you have to understand that South Africa, there are different classes who are in contestation, and so a person like Mandela, who was going to play a particular role in our country, was a kind of a contestation, and then they won him to a certain extent. And so why I'm saying they won him, because if it was the ordinary people who won Mandela, trust me, the social conditions that are currently existing in our country, possible, they were going to be on a different way rather than what people are experiencing. Because you know, Peter, that number of people are, as we speak, they are still living in poverty, and all those are a result of what we call it the early transition that happened in 1994, which was led by Mandela and his governing party. And you know, the legacy of Mandela can only be appropriated by the current act of his political organization. And that's the only way where we can judge Mandela, through the current ANC. And so when you look at the current ANC, you ask yourself, was it worth it for us to be taken by that euphoria in 1992?
Is that fair, though, to measure a person and his contribution in the 90s, perhaps, and say that what's happening today in 2020 is because of what he did in 1990?
Look, it's the issue of legacy, you get what I mean? And so as you, Peter Ndoro, and I, you know, people who will judge me about the thing that I done years and years back, even if it's 100 years, you know, that's what we call it, about legacy, you know.
Yeah, what you have done, but not your organization.
But the ANC talks about collective leadership, you get what I mean? And so when we talk about Mandela, we're not talking about Mandela as a person, we're talking about Mandela as part of the ANC in that collective analysis, or in that collective perspective that always ANC give us. And so we can't extrapolate Mandela as an individual in terms of his legacy, but we can only judge Mandela within his own political organization, so as well as we can judge Luthuli and the others, because Mandela is the product of the ANC, as the ANC always tell us. And so we can't simply say what ANC is doing today is totally something cannot.
He did give us a blueprint of the kind of society that we all hoped for, unified, rainbow nation, you know, one South Africa. Wasn't that his message?
Look, you have to understand that it's the same thing that Jacob Zuma was telling us, that Mandela was someone who was fighting against corruption, the inhuman, and so forth. So as well as Cyril is telling us the same thing about Mandela. But the fact of the matter, what are we experiencing on a daily basis, is totally different from what they are telling us. And so you can only judge the man through his action than his words.
All right, so if the current ANC corrects itself, does he then get the benefit of that as well?
Look, I don't think that the ANC will ever be able to correct itself. That's the reality. And to a certain extent, if ANC, as I'm saying, it can correct itself, they are trashing the little good that Mandela did.
All right,
And
so
at the end of the day, Mandela will look at Mandela as someone who really put us in this sinkhole, because a number of scholars are starting to question his integrity in those negotiations. And look at the aftermath of this negotiation, what is happening to the most of the South Africans who are claiming that, look, we are still poor, we are still landless, the economic system is still not being redressed. And so when you talk about these issues, you can't simply overlook the role that Mandela played.
All right. Perhaps finally, you know, people do bring up that issue of the negotiations and concessions. And the other side of that is that it's all contextual. And you have to look at what was happening at the time. The country was in flames. People were dying at a rate that we hadn't seen before in this country. And so to bring peace and to bring out a greater good, wasn't there an argument to say, I'll meet you halfway because people need to stop dying?
Look, Peter, when you talk about dying, there is currently in our country, there is a kind of a covert one. When you look at the Maricanas, how many people who died there? When you look at Kubayi-Ngubene, how many people are dying there? When you go up to the northern KwaZulu-Natal, how many people are dying there? And when you look at universities, they are burning. And so we have to understand that the violence in this country is still persisting. It might not be in that scale, but it's still there. And the fact of the matter is we have to accept that what we experienced in the past was not any other issue, but it was the issue of the exclusion of the majority from the economy of this country. And that might come back again. And so if we are not going to address the social economic conditions of the majority of the people of this country, what we experienced in the 80s will come in another format. And so the state is still there, the government is still there with its neoliberal economic policies. And so even today, we are still experiencing that. And if you say that Mandela brought us peace, yes, to a certain extent, he was used to pacify us, to give us a break, to give us a chance to sit around the table. But it's them who sat around the table. We never sat around around those tables. In Grotesque talks about talks in Codesa. But I think it is now where South African citizens would say, fine, now we as South African citizens, regardless of our skin pigmentation, political affiliation, we need to sit down and chart a way forward. And then possible, a new Mandela that encompasses the will and the collective will and the aspiration of the South Africa can come. But the one that we have, we know it very well that it was a Mandela that was crafted by the minerals energy complex, because they were seeing themselves that they were against the global economic tide and they wanted to participate in the global economy. And it was about political expediency in relation to their economic interest. Okay. But the second Mandela that is supposed to emerge is the Mandela that is supposed to bind the South Africans regardless of their skin pigmentation. And it must not be led by one person, but it must be the whole of South Africans who must be in dialogue.
All right. Xolani Dube, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your insights and your thoughts on this historic commemoration day. Thank you so much.